Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. This is Ashley if you are new here, and I'm going to take a sip of this drink because, as I said in the last video and the one that you will see after this one, I'm batch filming today. So that's why you see me in this chair in the same exact place with the same exact shirt, the same exact hair, and the same exact adorable little babe that is sitting in my lap. Let's see if I can move this a little bit down so you can kind of see him as well. Well, maybe not that because it's going to cut my face off, but so I want to share with you guys my birth story, okay? This is little Evander here. He is absolutely beautiful. I will also post some pictures of him so you can see him in a couple of different ways. And I want to share my birth story with you guys. It is a crazy one. And not too crazy, but it is crazy. And it has been a crazy few days. So let's get started, shall we? Grab you a cup of coffee. I wish I had one. I wish I could drink one. I've already had one today. And I'm breastfeeding him. So I try to only have one a day. And that is the end. And so I can't have another, but you can have one for me. I'm just going to sip on my lemonade and when my throat gets too dry, and we'll just keep on going. So, you guys heard in my last video where I was attempting to do Vlogmas for the second time. Attempt number 2. Let's try again. Still failed. You guys heard some things and some reasons why I was gone. I was having a lot of pelvic pain. I was dealing with Jensen being very sick, and I felt like absolute garbage. I literally was not sleeping. I was probably sleeping about 2 hours a night, and it was awful. The acid was absolutely astronomically out of control. I couldn't even breathe without my throat being on fire. It was a huge knot here. I tried everything. I tried everything they gave me. I tried everything they told me. I tried to elevate my, I was going to say levitate, elevate my head so that I didn't have as much, on my chest when I laid back and the acid wouldn't come up. Nothing worked. I was absolutely miserable 150% of the time. I had restless leg syndrome in my legs and in my arms so badly that I literally had to just fling my arms and my legs up in the air all the time throughout the night to even be able to sit there. Like, it was driving me absolutely crazy. But walking was hard, and my pelvis hurt, and I couldn't, I couldn't film clean with me's because I wasn't cleaning as much, and I need to plug this in before it cuts off on us. But I wasn't cleaning as much, and when I was doing the bare minimum and just trying to make things happen for my family. Oh, I hope this doesn't, I can't do it with one hand, I don't think. Okay, I got it. I was trying to just keep my family alive and keep my house from falling to the ground. And I was just doing little chores here and there, like little bits and pieces. This is still crooked and it's going to drive me nuts. Little bits and pieces here and there. And that's really all I could do because I was struggling. I was in struggle mode. I'm not going to lie. I found out at 36 weeks, I did mention this in the video before this one, but I found out at 36 weeks that I did have high amniotic fluid. It was a milder case, so they don't really know why mild case happens. Most of the time, if you have like an upper medium or severe case of, it's called polyamnio something. If you have high fluid, it's usually because of diabetes or gestational diabetes or hyperemesis or something that's going on that's causing your fluid to rise so quickly. But I didn't have that. I don't have any of that. I actually just have anemia. That's all I've ever had during pregnancy. I probably am anemic without being pregnant, but I am usually anemic during pregnancy especially, and low blood pressure. That's all I've ever had. So none of those explain the high amniotic fluid. So I had that, and it was making things so much more miserable because it was making my belly just grow with all of that fluid. And I don't know if you've ever had like a lot of bloating from fluid, but even when you're not pregnant, a whole heck of a lot of bloating and excess water is miserable. But imagine having that with a human inside of you as well. It was just god awful terrible, and everything was so heavy. And it felt heavy like water. Like, it just felt bad. And the acid was just kicking my butt and not being able to sleep and restless leg and all of the things. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And Jensen was also sick and extremely clingy. So if your belly's growing and getting more swollen and bigger and more bloated and horrid by the moment, and then you have a 2-year-old toddler who's literally wallowing all over your body, and he is trying to sit in a lap that doesn't exist and trying to push for more lap when the lap is disappearing rapidly and there's nothing you can do about it, like, it can get very stressful. And it was. My mental state was just done and over it. I think my poor husband was about to have a heart attack just because he was so anxious for me. And then I was taking care of all the things, and I was trying to deep clean this house, and we've had a lot of issues and stuff that's gone on that's just petty and it doesn't belong in this video, but about the house and about Joshua's job and about all of these different things, and everything was going wrong, and the van was acting up, and everything just kept piling up on itself. Plus I was pregnant and so dang miserable. So that's kind of where I went and fell off the wagon. But it's also when my pregnancy kind of took a turn to, okay, this is coming to a close. I did hold him in a little longer than Jensen. I had Jensen at 36 and 4 days, and I ended up having Evander, what was it? I had him at 37 and 3 days is what I ended up having him on. So let's talk about that for a minute. So I did go into my 36-week ultrasound. Okay, I had the ultrasound. They guesstimated that he was about 6 pounds and 11 ounces then, which is right on target for what Jensen was when he was born. He was 6'13" at 36 weeks and 4 days. So that's just about the same. However, those tests are never accurate. They're always a little bit off. But in this case, I feel like they were pretty accurate. A little bit off, but pretty accurate actually. So that's what it was guesstimating, 6 pounds 11 ounces. But I did have all of that heavy fluid, and it was a lot of fluid. So when all of that happened, a couple of days later, I had been having some Braxton Hicks contractions that were turning into kind of some pre-labor contractions, is what I would call them, where you have actual labor contractions. So it's not just Braxton Hicks, which is the tightening of your stomach. It's also pain. So you're having labor pain somewhere, but that labor pain is not really progressing. It's not like super strong. It's just enough to where you're like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. It hurts. And it's like that, but it doesn't progress. They don't get closer together. They're sporadic. And also not only that, but they are, they don't gradually get worse in pain either. So I was having those off and on, off and on, off and on, off and on. I would have them all day long. It would be during the night. It would wake me up in the night because the pain was getting a little bit worse. I would say a little bit more uncomfortable, but I know a lot of people's pain tolerance is not as high as mine. I have a pretty freaking high pain tolerance, and I also just deal with pain, pretty well. So it was pretty gnarly, but it wasn't like bad. I knew they weren't like true productive labor contractions, right? So after my 36-week appointment, it was about 2 days after that, or it was the next day. And she had checked my cervix, and then the next day, like I was losing my mucus plug. I had been losing my mucus plug before she checked my cervix. Then she did check my cervix. I was at about a 2 when she checked me then, and so I had been losing my mucus plug still gradually more and more and more so, which means absolutely nothing. Like, you think that means, oh my God, I'm in labor and losing my mucus plug. My water's going to break at any second. No, that's not what it means. I mean, your mucus plug can regenerate. It can completely just renew itself, and you didn't do anything. So it doesn't mean anything, but it was another sign that, hello, it's coming soon. So I had started having contractions, and I was cleaning. I wasn't even trying to go into labor at all. I was just cleaning my house, and I was trying to, it was actually the next week. So I had that on Wednesday. I was having some contractions through the weekend, but nothing that was a big deal. And then on a Tuesday, I was having some contractions. So I was like, okay. I was cleaning my house, and then all of a sudden I started having contractions. They started getting progressively worse and worse and worse, and I was like, okay, it's time. When I finally said it was time, they had been progressing for quite some time. I'd probably been having contractions for about 3 hours at that point, and they were getting progressively closer together and progressively worse in pain. I probably would have labored more at home. However, I had to get my kiddos where they were supposed to be. Jaron was actually with us, and his mom, we had to go give him to his mom, and then we had to go get the kids, and then we had to make sure the kids were with my parents, and all of their stuff was there, and they had bags, and they had their clothes, and they had all of the things. And so I did all of that, and then we went into the hospital. When we got to the hospital and you put my monitors on, they could immediately tell, oh my goodness, you're having a lot of contractions. They're like through the roof and blah, blah, blah. These are really intense. She checked me. I was still at a 2. She was like, I don't think you're going anywhere. We are keeping you here. This is, it has to be freaking labor because, man, you're having contractions one on top of each other. It had gotten to the point where I was having them every 20 seconds. And so I was like, okay, this is starting to get productive. Surely this is going to be productive. They kept me for a few hours, probably about 5 hours total, because they kept me for 2 hours and then they would check me again. And she was like, you really haven't changed. So when I left there, I was at a comfortable 2, which I had been at like a 1.5 is what it was. So I correct myself. I had been a 1.5 at my 36-week appointment. Now I was at a 2. Then when I left the hospital, I was at a comfortable 2, which means 2 with some room, right? And so it was just progressing super slowly. And then my body was just giving up. And the reason why is because when they checked me, they found out that Evander's head was low in the birth canal, exactly where it was supposed to go, head down. However, it was also, when they would check me, they could touch his head and it would just float away. And it would come back. And then they would check his head, and the moment they touched it, it would float away. And so his head was not pressing and giving me that pressure that I needed to help dilate my cervix and progress me into labor because of all the water. So the water was acting like a cushion between his head and my cervix, and it wasn't doing anybody any favors. And so my body was ready to go into labor, and I was laboring and laboring and laboring. However, the pillow of water was not allowing enough pressure to do what it needed to do, right? And to push me over the edge and get me that last little bit to keep progressing me. So I just went home. She gave me a muscle relaxer to kind of help me sleep. I had some contractions throughout the night, but most of them I didn't even care because that medicine was amazing. I actually got some sleep. And so I actually rested that night, and that's what she did. And that was it. I was fine the next day. I was not in labor the next day. I was having some contractions, but they were just back to Braxton Hicks that were pretty intense, but they were still Braxton Hicks. No productive labor, and I stayed that way, right? That was Tuesday. Okay, well, I was supposed to have a doctor's appointment on Thursday, and I'm trying to think of all of these days. They're kind of running together. I was supposed to have a doctor's appointment the next Thursday where she was going to take another ultrasound of my belly, make sure that my fluid had not risen, because if the fluid had risen, then that would be a reason for them to induce, just because it's getting more and more dangerous for you to carry him. We're going to go ahead and induce you, but instead I ended up going into the hospital on Saturday. So that was, my appointment was Wednesday with the ultrasound. Thursday is when I went in to the hospital and was having contractions. Okay. And then I ended up, Tuesday, why do I keep saying that? Tuesday before my next appointment. And then I had my 37-week appointment. And then on Saturday is when I started cleaning again. I had this complete urge to clean. So Saturday, December the 30th, I had a complete urge to clean, and I started cleaning my house, cleaning crazy again. And then I ended up having some contractions, but Friday, the day before that, and Saturday, I had noticed that like my underwear were wet and it was like water. So it wasn't like a lot of times, and this may be TMI for some people, but you know you're on a pregnancy video, so I mean, come on. But a lot of times in late pregnancy especially, you do have extra discharge when you are pregnant. So sometimes it can seem like a lot more than you're used to, and it's like, what the heck? But this was not that. This was like water, and it was clear, and it was, you know, I was noticing like small gushes of it randomly when I would pick things up or when I would do things. And I would also notice it when I woke up from sleeping. And so I was like, okay, this has to be amniotic fluid, right? Like that's all I can think of that it would be. And so I've never had my water break before, but that's what it seemed like to me. And so in my very inexperienced with amniotic fluid in your water breaking self, I thought, okay, this really seems like it must be amniotic fluid because I can't think of it being anything else. And so I called the doctor because it was a Saturday, and so I called the on-call nurse, and she was like, you need to go to the ER, go to the ER. And I'm like, oh, great. Because my nightmare was like, what if this is not amniotic fluid? What if I go to the ER and I get my husband and I have to get my parents to come get my kids, and they think it's go time, and I have to bring their bags to them just in case we stay at the hospital, and I make all these preparations and do all of these things and bring all this crap. I get my husband excited because I'm telling him that they're telling me I need to go to the ER, and then we get there and they're like, ma'am, you've just been peeing on yourself a little. And that's all it is. And then I have to go back and get, like, I was just terrified that that's what it was going to be. Like, I didn't feel like I was peeing on myself, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it happens in pregnancy where people think their water breaks and it's just pee. Like, they tell you that. Even Google says that to you. Like, you may be urinating on yourself. No, I wasn't. Like, I wasn't peeing on myself. Like, I was so sure of it. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I was like, well, you know, maybe they'll tell you it's something odd and weird and you don't even know what it is. And it's not this and it's not anything, and you shouldn't have went. You were stupid for going to the ER. But then the nurse called me again and was like, have you went to the ER yet? We would really feel more comfortable if you went to the ER. I was like, fine. So I did all the things, and I got my parents to come pick up the boys, and my dad came and picked him up. My mom was not feeling very well, which was a great time for her to watch the boys, but my dad came and picked them up, and he was like, are you hurting? Are you, having pains? And I was like, well, I mean, I actually was at that point having some labor pain. And I was like, well, I actually am having some contractions. I was like, but that's not why I'm going. And he's like, well, then why in the world are you going if they're not bad? I mean, I don't understand what's happening. And he was like, oh, you're leaking? Oh, and you could tell he was just leaking. Okay. And then what if I had to tell my dad it wasn't amniotic fluid? And he's thinking, well, then what are you leaking? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was mortified that was going to happen. So we go into the hospital, and I'm trying to talk Joshua down. I'm like, don't get your hopes up. This might not be it. It might not be anything. They just really want me to go get checked out. It might be nothing. We might not be doing this. There might not be anything to it. It might not be a big deal. We might go pick up the boys, blah, 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 blah. And she tells me that she's going to do a test. And so she, like, tests me or whatever. And it's almost like a pregnancy test, except for it's for amniotic fluid. And she's telling me all these things, and then she comes back, and it's like, if it's not, this and this and this in 20 minutes, like, that's when it has 20 minutes to tell us it's positive. And if it's it has 20 minutes to say if it's negative, and if it's positive, it should show up, within those 20 minutes, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, she's like, I see a very faint line, but I'm not sure if that's it or not. I'm not sure if it's really positive or if I'm just seeing things and blah, blah, blah. And she's saying all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. It's going to be one of those things, isn't it? Like, we're going to get our hopes up, and we're going to go wait, and then it's not going to be it, and we're going to be sent home, and who even knows what the leak? Who even knows what it is? I'll just ignore it. Never mind. And so I'm thinking all these things in my head. I'm going to have to tell my dad I was leaking some random thing, and who even knows what it is, and it's not amniotic fluid. I'm going to have to go get my kid. Like, I'm thinking all these things the whole time. And Joshua's just patiently, like, laying on the couch, like, lounging about, like, trying to take a nap. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, whatever. So we're sitting there waiting, and I am having some labor contractions that are getting a little bit uncomfortable. And so I'm just like, whatever. And she comes back and she's like, okay, I'm going to let you look at it. And I'm thinking, ugh, she's saying that because she's going to say it's negative and blah, blah, blah. She wants me to look at it, make sure. And I was like, well, I see a line. And she was like, me too. And so does Dr. Clem. So we're going to take you in and we're going to induce you today. Oh my God, the most amazing news I've ever heard in my life. I was like, what? Oh my gosh, yes. She's like, it is definitely amniotic fluid. We think that you have like a hairline leak at the top of it. And so, because she did check my cervix and she could still feel him floating around. She's like, so I don't really understand if he's floating around. How did your water break? How is it her? Are you leaking when he's still floating in this bubble? And she was like, I think it's at the top and he's acting like kind of like a stopper. But then when you move to make his head move any kind of way, that little bubble pushes out of the way and it's leaking a little bit. And so I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So they take me in and they admit me and she was like, you should be able to get your epidural pretty quickly. And I start having a little bit more intense labor contractions while I'm waiting on the epidural. But then the epidural gets there and the epidural is put in and I am on cloud 9 and I'm like, I don't even care what happens. I don't care. This is the best rest I've ever had in my entire life. Like, I'm not falling asleep because I'm interested in what's going on and I can't fall asleep and I'm trying to sleep and I can't. At this point, we've been there for a few hours, right? And we got there about probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we've been there for a few hours at this point. It's like 5 something and I'm getting my epidural. And she tells me that the doctor is going to come and break that rest of that water so we can hurry things along. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just letting you know that I'm a slow girl. And I'm slow at progression until I get over the hump. When I get over the 3 to 4 centimeter hump, it's a quick job, okay? So I'm just letting you know that. Once I get over that hump, it's go time, I said, and if she breaks my water, he's being born, okay? So if we can just get to that point, he'll be born. She's like, okay. Well, then the doctor has to go home because her little girl has a 104-degree fever and she's 3 and she wants her mama, and the dad doesn't know what to do because she's 4 and he has the 4-year-old and the 2-year-old little boy, and the 4-year-old wants her mama and she's really upset and she has a 104-degree fever and they don't know what's wrong with her and it's terrible. So she has to go home and take care of that, and when she comes back, then she'll break my water. I'm like, okay, but I'm waiting hours and hours and hours and there's no sign of her and there's no sign of anything. So then I'm asking again, like, is she gonna come and break my water? Because at this point I'm not progressing. I'm still like a 3, okay? I've only progressed 1 centimeter and we've been here for freaking hours. I've been on Pitocin, which is inducing me for labor, but it's taking forever, and I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I'm on cloud 9, so I'm not in pain and I don't really care, but at the same time I just want to get this done, like I want my little nugget. I want this to be over with. I'm tired of waiting. Josh was tired of waiting. He's getting super antsy and anxious. He's starving to death. Like, I send him to go get food because at this point it's like 8 o'clock at night and we've been there since like 2. And so I'm like, okay, just go ahead and go, get you some food, blah, blah, blah. He's like sneaking me French fries, which you're totally not supposed to do because you could asphyxiate and, that's terrible. Like, you'll just die. So you're not supposed to eat. But I'm totally eating little snippets of French fries because I'm so freaking hungry. I haven't even eaten all day. And it's like 8 o'clock at this point and she's still not coming. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, well, we've had some other people come in and they're at risk for like C-section and they're at risk for like going to labor at any moment on their own because they're progressing. And so she feels that you're easier controlled right now, like you're under control, but them on the other hand, they're not. And so she's trying to kind of assess who's more important, like the emergent situations first, and then she'll come and break your water. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So basically I was just getting pushed down the line, right? Meanwhile, I'm still slowly progressing on my own, okay? And so she was about to go on the on-call room and go to sleep, but my nurse stopped her and was like, do we have any plans on Miss Johnson? Because she's been waiting for quite some time for her water to get broken and blah, blah, blah. If you'll just come and check her, blah, blah, blah. And she had just been in to check me and I was at a 4, okay? So I was at 4 centimeters. And then she went and got the doctor and was like, yeah, she's been waiting for quite some time, blah, blah, blah. And so about 20 minutes later, the doctor comes in and she checks me. She checks my cervix and she says, oh, you're at a 7. And the nurse is like, what? I just checked her 20 minutes ago. She was at a 4. And I was like, I told you the 3 to 4 hump is really hard for me to make. But once I get there, girlfriend, I'm there. Like, that's what I'm telling you. Like, I was telling you ahead of time, like, that's the way my body works. It takes forever to get to that 4. But once I get to the 4, it's go time and we're good. And that's what was happening. My contractions were coming super strong, super consistent. I didn't feel them, so I didn't care. I was tired. I was resting. I was like, heck yeah. I was dozing in and out. Like, it was great. I was rested. I felt numb, and I wasn't in any pain. And I had been in pain for a long time. I was like, this is great. I felt great. Whatever. I don't even care if we wait forever. I don't care. This just feels great. And so I was good, you know? And I was watching TV on my phone, and I was okay. But I was getting a little tired of waiting, and I was just like, oh, I'm ready to have this baby. So she does break my water. And when she breaks the rest of the water, it's a lot, right? Okay, so it's a lot of water, and she breaks that, and then we're on a roll, right? So the nurse comes in, and she lays me on my side and sticks one of my feet in the stirrups to have me like all cocked to the side, and it's all sprawled and crazy, right? And my whole butt showing, and I don't even know, and Joshua doesn't even tell me. He's just letting me lay there with my butt showing, and I'm like, seriously, dude, like, you could have told me. And so they're doing that, and about 15 minutes later, after she says I'm a 7, and after she puts my foot in the syrup, I'm like, you might want to check me. And she's like, well, I mean, it's only been 20 minutes. You might want to check me. And she's like, okay, you feel a lot of pressure? I was like, oh, yeah, a lot of pressure, yeah, for sure. And she's like, okay. And she's like, oh, okay, I'd say you're there. And I'm like, yeah, girl, I feel like it. And she's like, okay, let's put your leg down. And at that point, like, I was so numb, I couldn't feel anything at all. And oh, I have to rewind and tell you the other part, but we'll get to that part in a second. So I was like, okay, so she puts my leg down, and she like puts me off, you know, laying on my back. And she's like, okay, just try not to push. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the stupidest words anyone could ever say, try not to push. Like, oh, you can't help it, okay? Your body's pushing for you. You're not doing anything on your own. And so she goes and gets the doctor or whatever. She tells her that I'm ready, and the doctor's getting ready to come in. And she's like, okay, do you remember how to push? And I'm thinking, like, for real, lady? This is my 5th kid. Like, do I remember how to push? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, I know that sometimes when you're numb, like, sometimes you just forget and you don't remember how to push and where to push. She's like, so we're going to do a practice push, okay? And I'm thinking, okay, you better get ready. And she's like, we're going to do a practice push. So she goes down, and she's like, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, push. Okay, stop pushing. She's like, don't push. Never mind. Don't push. And I'm like, she's like, you just moved the baby. And I was like, I know what I'm doing. I'm telling you, lady. Like, we're ready to go here. I'm just waiting on the doctor to catch. Like, that's all that's going on. I told you this was going to happen. Like, I told you all the way through exactly what my body was going to do, and it's doing exactly as I said. And so the doctor comes in, and I push 2 times, and I have to push 2.5 times to get him out. And they're just amazed. They're like, holy crap, lady, like, you're doing it. Like, whoa, okay. And the only reason why I had to push that many times is because he had his hands like this, kind of like it is now. He had his hand like this, and he wouldn't move it, and she was trying to, like, shove his hand back down so his head could come through first, and he just kept trying to pull his arm up. And so she had to kind of finagle his arm with his head and pull his shoulder and all the things to get him out, because he was trying to be stubborn and stick his hand up there, just like he is right now, like, just like that. And so this little nugget was born at 2:33 in the morning, and he was 7 pounds and 5 ounces, and he was 20 inches long, and he shot out like he was on a surfboard, and it was so much water. It was insanity, okay? Like, so much water. It was so much. Okay, now I have to do the rewind because I forgot like one of the most epic parts of the story. I completely forgot and glossed over. So after I had changed nurses in the middle of labor, okay? So when I had my first nurse before she transitioned into the 7 o'clock nurse for the night shift, I had another nurse who got me my epidural and everything, and we were chatting, and she was amazing and blah, blah, blah. But she, when I got my epidural about 30 minutes later, she was checking my blood pressure, and she was like, ooh. And so she was doing a bunch of tests and stuff. She was getting my blood work ready. She was getting a bunch of stuff ready to kind of wrap this thing up, right? Because she was about to get off work, and she was trying to prepare for the next nurse and get everything ready for me to get my water broken and have the baby, and all my admittance paperwork and all of that good stuff, and like my IVs and stuff. Like they have to give you a certain amount of fluid before they do, you know, all these kind of things. And so she was doing all of that. And I was like, I'm feeling a little weird. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I feel like I'm about to pass out. And this horrible heat came over me, and it started like in my stomach, which it probably started lower, but I had my epidural, so I couldn't feel it, right? But it started here, and it just kept rising up into this horrible heat feeling all over my whole body. And my body, I just started sweating, like dripping, literally dripping in 2 seconds or less. My whole hair was soaked. My face was just pouring sweat. I was pouring sweat everywhere. It was so hot. And I was like, I think I'm passing out. And she was like, okay. And she was just like super calm about it. And she was super amazing. And she was like, are you all right? And I was like, not really. But I am passing out. And she was like, you feel dizzy? I was like, oh yes. And everything went black, and it started going in my ears. And when I was trying to talk back to her to communicate, it was like I was screaming in a tunnel. It was very strange. And yeah, I was passing out. And what happened is my blood pressure, like with the epidural and the medication, I already have low blood pressure anyway. And something about that, the dosage that he gave me in my epidural, my blood pressure dropped 50/30, and I was passing the heck out, and it was insane. It felt so awful. And she was like, okay, let me try to fix it. Give me a second. Stay with me. Stay with me. And she like put this stuff in my IV, and it was just like, ooh, and it like upped my blood pressure like that. And it was like, okay, I'm okay now. And so like they were like freaking out about me the whole time, and during labor they were bringing me juices and like all this different kind of stuff to keep my sugar up, and so my blood pressure wouldn't bottom out. And during like right before labor, right before I pushed, I was like, Joshua, give me those juices, because I started feeling super nauseated and super faint feeling. And I was like, I need that. I need something. And I was like chugging juice, and like it did help. Like it elevated my blood sugar for a minute, and I was able to go through labor, and I wasn't like throwing up or passing out. I was okay. So that's pretty much it, you guys. Like that's my birth story. He's amazing. He's beautiful. He has been doing amazingly. He all of his levels were good. Everything was good. We stayed in the hospital. He was born on 123, which is amazing. That's so cool. That'll never happen and it was great. And he was born the last day of the year, and it just brought such a gift to that year. He is so perfect, and we absolutely are smitten with him. All the boys love him. They are just acclimating to him so well. They want to know where he is, what he's doing, what's going on with him, what's blah blah blah. They're so caring and loving, every single one of them. And Jensen's over the moon with him. Too much. He wants to do too much. He wants to touch him and crawl all over him and hug him way too tight and do wild things and be very rough. And that's Jensen, like a wrecking ball. And so that has been a challenge. And he still wants to crawl all over me, so that has been a challenge. But otherwise, we're doing good. Last night was his very first night at home. He slept 2 3-hour intervals, and yeah, I'm going to be doing some postpartum videos. There are some things that I want to talk about postpartum wise, as far as postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, breastfeeding, some things like that. My milk has definitely come in and it is not comfortable at all. I have the whole engorgement process going on. I don't know if you guys have ever breastfed, but if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where your milk comes in with full force and he cannot possibly drink that much. And so it has to get its levels worked out. I could always pump, but I hate pumping and I don't really want to, but I could always do that. And so yeah, I am going to I'm gonna update you guys on things that are going on, but that is what I wanted to share with you. That is my rather long tale of craziness and my birth story that ended up not being bad at all. My actual worst pain was the other day when I went into labor and then the labor stopped. I had to labor that for about 5 hours, and that had some pretty rough contractions, but other than that, this labor was super easy. The actual birth labor was super easy. I got an epidural when my contractions were nothing at that point, right? Like, they were just uncomfortable compared to what was to come. I got that epidural so fast and it was grand and glorious, and all because that first labor punctured my amniotic sac enough to where it was trickling down that whole time, and I just noticed it enough to go and they induced me. Because if you didn't know, that is very high risk for an infection for it to keep trickling like that. Like, they don't want anything to get into your amniotic sac, and so if stuff is coming out of it, then bad things can go into it, and that's really, really bad for you and baby. So they want to hurry up and stop that as fast as they can. So that's why they induced. But yes, I am super happy with the way that went. I don't think it could have went any better. Joshua was already off work for the day. We went to the hospital. He was off work the next day and the next day already because of the holiday. And then he went back to work. And so it was, it worked out. All the anxiety we were worrying about as far as scheduling and working and all of that, it was nothing. If you've heard me on my planning channel, I've been like freaking out about it. Like, what's the schedule going to be? When is he going to work? When is he not? What's going to happen? And I didn't have to worry about that. It was all over with. And so, yeah, it's just been really, really good. And I just hope that things level out and other stressors that we've been dealing with will level out just like this one did. So thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate every one of you. I really appreciate you being a part of this channel. I have so many other things that I want to bring to the table and things to come. Be looking out for a Sunday video. I have already filmed it and I will be in the same clothes, so I'll just be here then, and you can come back and see me on Sunday. It's a fun topic to talk about, and it's part one of a two-part video in a series that I'm doing. So it's the first part of the series, but it has 2 parts in itself, and so it is part 1, and I will share part 2 with you next week. And that is all I have for you today. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye, guys.